What's going on, everybody? My name is Jake, and today we have a new mix walkthrough for you guys. But before I get into that, I just want to say you should come check me out on Facebook at Suslaudio, Suslaudio. Here you can just kind of see what's going on with me. I post almost every day, just kind of what I'm doing, what I'm up to. So if you're interested in my videos, you know I don't post every day, and sometimes I'm only posting once a week at this current period of time. But just come check me out on Facebook if you're interested in what I'm doing, and I'll keep you up to date on that. As well as, come subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Getting close to 200 subscribers as the time of making this video, so that's been a big goal of mine for a while. So come show your love. It goes a long way with this channel. Anyways, let's get into today's video on our mix walkthrough. I've recently, I don't know if you guys have seen it, but I had a pre-production and recording video of this tune that I've been working on. This is one of my own songs that I wrote probably 2 years ago, but have decided to re-record to see how far I've come as an audio engineer and a musician. So this is going to be the mix walkthrough of this whole piece. As you can see, I already have all the parts recorded, ready to go, generally edited. So we're going to go ahead and start mixing. And in today's video, we're going to talk about drums, bass, and just the rhythm section as a whole. But before we do that, I want to go over some basic things that you should think about while you start to mix. And the first thing that you want to do is you always want to have a master fader. What the master fader does is essentially gives you a reference in how loud your whole track is, because sometimes you'll be saying, oh, I need to raise this up, so you start to raise up a certain element, then all of a sudden you start to hear clipping, and you're asking yourself, why is it clipping? It's not showing that on the specific channel. It's because all of your elements in your mix come together and essentially clip the master fader. So having this master fader here can give you an idea of where you are at in total, and instead of raising up certain tracks, you'll know to lower other tracks around it to make that one appear louder, and therefore you will not clip. So the master fader is a very important part of mixing, and it's just something that I figured I should mention. So this next thing that I want to talk about is setting your general levels. So obviously right now we're all at Unity at 0 dB. Now this is not where we're going to want to keep them. So we're going to start playing this. You can already tell it's going to be way too loud. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lower all of these down to probably about 6 dB. I'll speed through this process and get back to you guys. Alright, so now that we're at around 6 dB, minus 6 dB for all of them, let's take a listen to them and kind of start putting together where exactly we want the levels and seeing where they end up on the master fader. So this is the kind of the first step you want to do when you start mixing. Start setting levels. Usually you do this while you're recording. However, I just wanted to go through this to show that it's a part of the actual process. So what I'm going to start by doing is listening to the full song. Not all the way through, but just to get a general idea of where everything sits, what needs to be raised up, what needs to be lowered. So let's get into it. Personality. My eyes are closed, my wits about me. Never struggle with the enterprises just around the bend. Let's throw these chains in the sea, live our lives as they were meant to be, and all will be relieved, my friend. The story's only real till the end. Alright, so now I'm going to start soloing out drums and bass. Lower the drums. Oops, bring up the bass. Bring in the acoustic. Bring in the electric guitar. Start bringing the main vocals. Why can we and background vocals. It's in our personality. our eyes are closed and we cannot see. Now I know there's a couple extra parts in the chorus, so we're gonna jump to there. Life is too short, I'm gonna seize the day. It wouldn't be quite sad to miss it. If I had a choice, I'd run far away, and then I'd have time to solo guitar. Alright, so now we have a decent first run through of all of our levels. Really quick walkthrough. We'll be kind of going back and changing these as we move forward in our mix. I just wanted to show you a general idea of leveling out your mix in the beginning. And as you can see, we have a lot of room on our master, which is very important. We're probably only going to be peak around 8 dB, maybe minus 8 dB. So we got some room to work with here. And so yeah, let's keep moving forward here into the rhythm section. So the biggest difference here with me in this song is obviously I didn't record real drums. I am currently using Easy Drummer from Toontrack, which is a great drum software, by the way, especially if you're looking to just start out with drum programming. This is wicked easy to use, hence the name Easy Drummer. But it's great and it sounds fine. It's really quick to put together. You have your own mixer. You can kind of choose to, raise your kick, your snare, and everything. I'm going to lower our snare. The snare seems loud. Anyways, but this software is great. The only thing is that you have to keep in mind is that it's pretty much already mixed by the time that you're putting it into the song. So when you're actually mixing the whole piece, you don't really want to be adding too much EQ, too much compression or anything. You just kind of want to make it sit in the mix with the other instruments. So that's what I'm going to be doing here. So during this whole rhythm section, I'm mostly going to be keeping my mind on the bass track and how the drums interact with that bass track. So the first thing that I want to do here is I'm going to pull up a subtractive EQ, or just an EQ, my stock plugin here in Pro Tools. And we're going to take out some frequencies that aren't necessary, which in this case are going to be the higher end for the bass. I'm going to solo out the bass and the drums here. Now I'm going to start bringing this back. Another quick note is I've been messing around a lot with your octave slope, your 6 dB. This goes to 24 dB per octave, which means essentially that every octave that you progress, the filter reduces those frequencies by 24 dB. So it's 24 dB per octave of slope. What I've found recently is that 6 dB makes it sound a lot more natural, and it's a lot less apparent that you're actually even using some kind of filter. So I found that 6 dB is a great place to start if you're filtering out high or low end. So we're going to start with 6 dB, and we're going to start bringing this back until we really start to hear the effect on the bass guitar. I do like a lot of that treble in the bass. I want that treble to come through as it makes the bass stick out more. So that's pretty good. So we still got rid of a good amount of this here, which will make more room for the lead guitar, the acoustic guitar, and the cymbals and the overhead, as well as the voice. So that's good. I think that's a good place to start. And now I just want to do a couple sweeps, which means I'm going to raise our Q to as small as possible so we're affecting the least amount of frequencies, so we can pinpoint the harmful frequencies more effectively. So, and then we also want to raise it by 18 dB so they're most noticeable. Now we just literally just sweep through the frequencies until we find something that's harmful, and then we can reduce that. some interesting frequencies going on in this range here. I'm going to change the part. We're going to go to the beginning. I'm going to lower that a little bit. 3 dBs are usually a good place to start in terms of gain reduction. Now I just want to go to the mid frequencies and test out a couple little things here. See if there's anything harmful going on. Kind of like an airiness and twang that it's not too helpful, so I'm just going to take out even like 2.5 dB of that. So it just cleans it up a little bit, so that's where we'll stay with that. Now before I do anything to the drums, like I said, I want to mix minimalistically, you know what I mean. I don't want to add too much to the drums in general, so I'm going to go ahead and start adding a little bit of EQ to our bass in terms of boosting. See if there's anything that we can add. I want to maybe beef it up a little bit more. What I usually do is I usually like having the bass in the lower part of the frequency spectrum and have the kick a little bit higher. So think about bass being around 60 hertz to 80 hertz and the drums being around 110 to 140 depending on the type of kick, obviously, and the type of bass. Now, some people like to flip that around, have the kick be in the lower range and the bass be in the higher range. It's really all personal preference. I've just found that I like the bass to be a bit lower. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn our low frequency filter or low frequency EQ to our bell shape, and I'm going to lower it down to, let's start at 55 hertz. I'm going to bring it all the way up. And we're going to start sweeping until we find a frequency that we feel is really giving the bass power. At 60 hertz is quite powerful, but I'm going to bring this back. Really helps fill in that low end. So I like that. You know, just in general, I don't think I'm going to add too much to this. I might do another sweep here, the low mid frequencies. I really like the high end content of this bass. The less you do, it's really the better. You know, if you can get a really good recording take that you're happy with, you really don't always have to do a lot to the mixing, and that's better because there's less processing on it, less things that can make your mix muddy. So I'm just going to do one quick sweep here of the low mid frequency range, see if there's anything that's going to benefit us. I do kind of like that, gives it a little bit more twang. I'm just going to add like 2 dB of that. It's a very subtle EQ. Now, like I said, I wanted to give the kick drum and the bass room, so I'm going to bring up virtual mix rack here for my drums. Bring this one up too so we can see both. And what I want to do here is I'm going to essentially create that space, that frequency space for each one. So we know we've reduced our bass, or boosted our bass at around 60 hertz. So what we want to do here is I'm going to add a high pass filter to our drums, and we're going to put it around, let's say, 80 hertz. So it starts to filter off after 80 hertz. So it's leaving room for that bass, and really all this will be affecting is the kick. It's just reducing those low frequencies in the kick that would normally be competing with the bass guitar. Now I also want to maybe boost a little bit in around 110 to 140. So we're going to do that too. Start at, let's say, 110. Maybe looking for a little bit more snap. Right around there. I'm going to bring this down just like 2 dB maybe. .28. Cleans up that low end just a little bit. All right, now that we know that we have our kick drum boosted around 139, we want to just think about sculpting this EQ frequency. So we're going to go back to our subtractive EQ on our bass, and we are going to take out a little bit of that 139 in the bass just to leave a bit more room for our kick drum. This is a lot of what you want to be doing with EQ, is just sculpting your frequency spectrum, giving everything its own sonic space. Awesome. So essentially right there we've done a quick sculpting of the frequency range for the bass and the kick drum. Now let's move forward, and I want to add a little bit of compression to our bass guitar, make it pop a little bit more. Now I'm going to show you how I do this. I'm going to set 2 layers of compression. Our first one's going to be this FG116 compressor. Now it seems like I'm going through these very quickly in terms of throwing things on there. The reason for this is I've been using this Slate Digital Everything bundle for over a year now, and I just have certain processors that I'm very comfortable with and I know how they sound. So that's why I'm choosing these, is just because I already know what I kind of want on each element. So when you pick your plugins, it's really just about using them a lot and trying to use them to their full potential, more so than just having a large variety of plugins. So anyways, let's start working with this here. In this FG16, my goal will be to compress the transient of the bass and make it pop a little bit more. So we're going to start by increasing our input until we get some gain reduction. And then lower our output so that it doesn't add too much level. We want to mess with our attack and release. I want a fast attack because I want it to affect the transient, and we want a fast release so that it releases quickly and doesn't affect the sustain. You really listen to that beginning of the bass hits until they have a bit more pop. Add a little bit more of the input here. I only have 4 ratio, which is plenty in my opinion. So we actually have a lot of gain reduction. So that's adding a lot of snap, which is good, which is what I wanted. Now I also want to work on sustain a little bit, so I'm going to bring up the FG401, And we're going to start bringing up the threshold. Got a little gain reduction. Raise it up to a smaller ratio. We don't want to affect the sustain too much. We already have a slower attack, and we want a slow release. Affect the sustain of the bass, as I said. I just changed the circuitry, which changes the character of the compressor. I want to affect a little bit more of it, so I'm going to quicken up the attack time. This actually isn't a great part because it's very quick notes, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to a verse here, or a pre-chorus where we have longer sustained notes. You can hear that sustain be brought up when this comes in. So there we go, we added our compression. Now the last thing that I want to do here for the rhythm section is add a stereo auxiliary track, and what we want to do with this is we're going to essentially put a compressor and potentially some EQ, and we're going to kind of mold our drums and bass together. I'm going to call it PC for parallel compression. Oh, right. All right, we're going to call this rhythm compression, or RC. There we go. Just like to color code my tracks for easy viewing. Now, something to be aware about is that once I add these tracks on a send to our bus, it's going to come out a lot louder. So we want to be aware of that. So we have bus 1, 2, which is sending our drums to our input of our rhythm compression track, and the sends of our bass track to our rhythm compression track. So both these tracks are now should show up here. It's going to be a lot louder. And you can see signal coming through here. So now what we want to do is I want to bring this down probably a good 6 dB. Like I said, I want less compression on my drums, and probably bring this down 4 dB. Just lower this a little bit here. We want it to be about similar level. So that's only adding very little bit now, so that's good. Okay, so now what we want to do is go to our multi-channel plugins, dynamics, and add a VBC rack. And what essentially this is just a rack of 3 different compressors, so that we can kind of start layering our compression in in small amounts, so we can really have a detailed compression setting. So this first one, like I said, I want to kind of focus on the transients. So we're going to want a fast attack and a faster release. We'll leave it at medium for now. And what we're going to do is we'll start bringing up our threshold. We're going to set our ratio to 3.0 for starters, and we're going to bring up our threshold until we start getting gain reduction. Bring it back a little bit. We want this first setting to be rather mild. And we want to focus more on the attack and release. start to hear the transients of both the drums and the bass come out without, with. Just a lot more pop in the beginning of each instrument, which is what I wanted. So now let's move on to a second layer of compression. What I want to do with this is focus more on what comes right after the transient. So we're going to have a little bit of a slower attack, still rather fast, and a medium release time. So let's bring up our ratio to around 3 and start bringing our threshold. Bring it up a little bit more. It's pretty mild right now. I'm going to bring it up a little bit. There you go. That's a lot more detail in each one. So let's take it without it. Just a lot more detail in each of the dynamic ranges of each element. So I'm pretty happy with that. Now, one more really cool little trick that I want to show you guys. Something that I learned when I was in school for this actually is on this parallel compression track, what you can do is, we're going to add a virtual mix rack, and this just kind of makes everything a bit more detailed. Like we already kind of detailed our dynamics, so let's detail our frequencies a little bit more. Because we have both our drums and our bass coming in through this track, we can kind of affect them in the same way. So what we're going to do is we're going to add this air earth EQ and this air EQ. And what this is going to do is essentially add some width to our low end and some shimmer to our high end after our parallel compression track here. And let's see what we can do with this. Hear that low end kind of come up a little bit. Just a really quick explanation of what this is. As you can see, this kind of affects how the slope works. If I move the knob closer to this side, you'll see that this frequency, which is 104 currently, will actually be accentuated before it's filtered off. If I was to move it towards this side, it would just filter it off. So I want it to be accentuated around 104, so that's why I have it closer to this side, and then this decides the slope, as I mentioned previously, with the stock plugin here. So that's the slope of 6 dB, 12 dB, so on and so forth. So yeah, that's what I'm doing here. I do want to accentuate 104, bring up the bass a little bit. Now let's look at the air or the shimmer. Listen to those cymbals. So really affecting the high end around 13 kilohertz. Just giving it that full frequency range spectrum. so that you kind of hear the full range of the spectrum. But yeah, so that's going to be, I think, it for this first episode. Hopefully I covered everything. Yeah, so that's essentially how I'd go about doing our quick mix up our rhythm section. Now, obviously, this is a bit different because I'm using software drums, but the process really doesn't change too much. The only thing I'd want to mention is that you always want to, or in my experience, you always want to EQ before you compress. You want to fix, fit, and feature your element before you kind of solidify it within its dynamic range. And you kind of do, if you were to have a full drum set, you know, kick, snare, overheads, toms, you'd want to do that to each one of those elements. So all this really does is skip over some of those steps and makes it quicker process. So that's the only difference for this scenario. I hope you guys kind of understand that. And I know obviously not everybody's using drum software, and obviously having each drum element, you have a lot more control, which is great. But this is what I have to work with here, and you kind of learn how to deal with what you got to work with. So I hope you guys learned something from this video. In the next video, I'll be taking a look at the instruments, acoustic guitar, piano, and electric guitar, and kind of bringing those in, how to make them sound bigger and just more elegant in general. And yeah, that will be that for the second episode of this mix walkthrough series. So like I said, I hope you guys learned something. If you guys find these videos helpful, definitely give it a like and subscribe to my channel. It's greatly appreciated. And until next time, have a good day, guys.